The Beyond the Dream. Lesser-known stories of Martin Luther King Jr.'s special video is here. Today, we go on an adventure to explore the depths of this legendary civil rights activist, illuminating the lesser-known facets of his life and impact. As we learn more, we want to give an accurate and fair portrait, while avoiding sensationalism to inform and inspire discussion about the guy who created the idea. The Struggles and Imperfections. The Struggles and Imperfections refers to Martin Luther King Jr.'s human side, which is sometimes forgotten in awe of his achievements as a civil rights leader. This element of his biography acknowledges that King, like all others, had to overcome obstacles and make mistakes along the way to become an advocate for justice and equality. Leading the civil rights movement, despite fierce resistance and life threats, was one of the major challenges King faced. He struggled with times of confusion, dread, and doubt over the course he was following. His mental and emotional health suffered due to the weight of his leadership duties and the ongoing pressure to effect change. Furthermore, King had flaws, just as every other person does. He was not free from scrutiny and criticism of his private life or from making errors. His management of interpersonal relationships and moral uncertainty have drawn criticism from some quarters as indications of his flaws. His various aspects serve as a reminder that even notable individuals may be intricate and multidimensional, having virtues and vices. We may better comprehend the difficulties Martin Luther King Jr. endured and the tenacity with which he fought for civil rights by admitting his flaws and shortcomings. It makes him more relatable and enables us to recognize the strength and tenacity he displayed despite his flaws. To properly appreciate the breadth of his accomplishments and the complexity of his legacy, it is imperative to be aware of these facets of his life. Opposition to the Vietnam War. Beyond his work for civil rights, Martin Luther King Jr.'s advocacy included opposition to the Vietnam War. As the war intensified, King loudly opposed it and quickly became one of its most well-known leaders. He thought the war was unfair and took important resources away from dealing with domestic concerns like poverty. Some political and civil rights groups criticized King for opposing the war, believing he should only concentrate on domestic civil rights issues. King, however, recognized how multiple injustices were intertwined and held that the struggle for civil rights was inextricably tied to the struggle for peace and against war. His daring action revealed his dedication to nonviolent values and emphasized his larger vision for a just and equal society at home and abroad. King's resistance to the Vietnam War is evidence of his unshakable commitment to pursuing justice and equality worldwide, despite suffering criticism and reputational hazards. Criticisms within the civil rights movement. The internal arguments and divergent viewpoints among the activists and leaders engaged in the fight for racial equality and social justice during the 1950s and 1960s are called criticisms within the civil rights movement. Although the civil rights movement was a concerted effort to combat racial segregation and discrimination, it was also distinguished by several ideological stances and tactics. The nonviolent approach, which Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, fervently supported, was a key source of dispute. Other civil rights activists, such as Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, advocated a more proactive and aggressive strategy, contending that the African American community needed to defend itself to be shielded from oppression and violence. The speed and breadth of the movement's development also drew criticism. Some activists perceived King's emphasis on nonviolence and gradual transformation as too quiet and insufficiently transformative. To combat deeply rooted structural racism, they demanded more drastic and quick action. There were also conflicts about ties with white allies and the function of white activists within the movement. Some African American leaders were wary of white participation because they thought it might muddy the movement's message or give rise to stories about how white people saved them. Others, on the other hand, saw the value of racial harmony in bringing about substantial societal change. Government surveillance. Governmental monitoring and data collection on people, groups, or organizations is called government surveillance. Martin Luther King Jr. was the subject of intense monitoring by the U.S. government as part of the COINTELPRO program of the FBI. Concerns regarding violating civil liberties and using surveillance to repress dissent, and the civil rights movement were raised due to the surveillance's attempt to undermine and discredit his leadership. The disclosures about the government's interference in King's personal life were extremely upsetting and provided insight into activist difficulties during the civil rights movement. Emphasis on economic justice. Beyond civil rights, Martin Luther King Jr.'s work placed a strong emphasis on economic justice. He understood that eliminating the economic inequalities that fueled inequality was necessary to achieve racial equality. King pushed for measures to support marginalized populations by calling for equitable pay, employment opportunities, and an end to poverty. His emphasis on economic justice brought attention to the connections between social and economic problems, encouraging a more all-encompassing strategy to combat systematic injustice and build a society where everyone might enjoy equal chances and wealth. That concludes our exploration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s lesser-known stories on our trip beyond the dream. We hope this video has shown the many facets of this illustrious civil rights leader's life. Martin Luther King Jr. left a lasting impression on history via his early activism in Montgomery and his stirring speeches and persistent dedication to justice. But keep in mind that he wasn't alone himself. Alongside Dr. King, other people fiercely battled for the ideals of justice and equality. Let's continue the fight for justice and equality for everyone as we reflect on the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and draw strength from his fortitude. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey, and we hope it has sparked meaningful discussions and reflections. Don't forget to share this video and keep the dialogue alive. Remember, the dream lives on in each of us. Let's work together to create a better and more just world. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more captivating content like this.